Welcome back, survivor. If you can hear this, it means you're still alive. This is Jack's Nightmares, and this is your next story. 2 months after we rolled past the East Ridge, life had already shifted twice over. At first, we thought we could settle in the basin where the tanks and the small sheds gave us steady water and walls that didn't complain. For a while, it worked. The beans grew, the fences stayed quiet, and the Jeep only left for short loops that came back with new notes in the margin and the kind of silence you could trust. A full month passed without more than a single walker pressing against the fence line. For the first time since the outbreak, we felt something close to routine. But routine doesn't last. Around day 40, the radio started carrying a voice on repeat. It wasn't Reese this time. It was a new broadcast. Smoother, practiced, saying the same thing every dawn and dusk. Quiet zone, no infected for days. Trade welcome, no guns on the table. The phrasing never changed. The timing never shifted. It sounded too clean, too professional. That was the first reason I didn't trust it. But it was also the reason we couldn't ignore it. If someone was organized enough to run a broadcast like that, then either it was a trap, or it was a kind of order we hadn't seen in years. Both possibilities demanded a look. We argued it for a week without raising voices. Eliza wanted to test it. She said if it was real, it could mean access to medicine or trade routes. Mara leaned the other way. She had no interest in walking into another person's set of rules. I sat in the middle and tried to read the signs. In the end, the water kept us comfortable but not safe. If word of that basin spread, we'd eventually face a group bigger than us, or someone like Cal's people, only meaner. We'd built enough to leave behind and not regret. So we packed the Jeep, sealed the garden tubs under a tarp, left markings for whoever came next, and rolled out. The next weeks on the road reminded us why we couldn't afford to sit still too long. The Jeep was heavier now, with the mounted M240 on the ring, but it handled well, as long as I kept speeds sane and watched the temperature gauge. Every long run meant I stopped to check belts and fluids like clockwork. The weapon wasn't just dead weight, it earned its keep. Twice we met crowds of infected pressed into choke points along the road. The first time, Mara cleared a dozen with controlled bursts, the sound rolling out across the fields and bringing silence back fast. The second time, we didn't even need to fire. The ring itself was enough to convince a band of scavengers shadowing us that we weren't worth the risk. The worst trouble didn't come from the infected. It came from people. On one run through a dry stretch of farmland, we spotted smoke columns at midday. Curiosity nearly cost us. We rolled closer and found 3 burned-out wagons and what looked like a trade caravan stripped bare. We moved to leave, but a steel cable was already across the road behind us. Men with painted faces stepped out of the ditches, armed with bats, machetes, and one old hunting rifle. Cannibals. Their mistake was underestimating the Jeep. I rammed the push bar into their line before they could regroup. Mara fired short and precise from the roof. Eliza covered our flank. We didn't spare them. Leaving those kinds of people alive only guarantees more dead travelers later. When it was done, we cut their cable, stripped the rifle and a sack of supplies, and moved. None of us said much that night. 2 weeks later, the Jeep showed its first signs of strain. A belt began to fray, whining on cold starts. We stopped at a shuttered mechanics bay and stripped what we could from a row of abandoned sedans. Eliza found a small box of spares still in plastic, hidden under a collapsed shelf. Without that box, the Jeep might have been finished within the month. I took my time with the install, bolted everything back clean, and triple-checked tensions before we left. It bought us another stretch of road. The broadcast kept coming. Every dawn the same voice. Quiet zone. Trade welcome. No infected for days. It gnawed at us. Too consistent. Too polished. We started catching fragments of other survivors speaking low on open channels, repeating the same phrases we heard. Some said they were headed to the expo grounds. Some said they had already arrived. None of them stayed on air long. That silence after was louder than any scream. By the time we rolled past the East Ridge for the last time, the air had shifted. The wet rot of the basin had given way to dry heat. The jeep felt heavier with the mount, but it carried us fine as long as we respected its limits. We left the valley with no ceremony, no radio farewell, no flag, just the road ahead and the echo of those daily broadcasts pushing us forward. The expo grounds sat behind a chain of faded banners and 2 rows of jersey barriers. Solar string lights hung across a lane like a festival nobody wanted. Water barrels lined the approach. A big sign said medical in red, then repeated it in Spanish. A man in a clean vest waved us in with slow arms. He did not look scared. He looked trained. The lane narrowed, and a person in a mask stepped up with a clipboard and asked us to secure weapons for safety and step into decontamination. I kept the engine running and my hands on the wheel. Eliza leaned forward just enough to see past him and looked where the ground darkened under fresh paint. Mara scanned the shadow behind the banner edges and the low carts near the exit gate. We watched in silence and let them fill the space with talk. A cart sat under a tarp near the end of the lane. The tires were new. The frame held a roll of spikes under canvas. One tug on a rope and the cart would slide into our path and shred us if we were stupid enough to roll over it. A chain gate hid behind a stack of sandbags on the left. The hinge post had a fresh weld at the base. The right side had the same chain folded in a box with a cap on the posts. The hinges were the weak point, not the chain, always the hinge. 2 volunteers with smiling eyes moved toward the rear of the jeep with that casual, fake stretch of people who want to cut straps while you chat. The man at my window kept the spiel going. We have clean water and a clinic. You can trade after decon. We will store your rifles so nobody gets nervous. His eyes kept flicking to my hands on the wheel. His partner on the far side took a half step to get a look at the roof mount and tried to act surprised in a friendly way. That told me they thought they had an answer to it. Either a chain overhead or someone in cover with a rifle trained on the pintle. I did not scan hard. I watched my mirrors and the left hinge and the spike cart handle and the hands touching the strap. "Window down a crack, please," the man said. I kept it where it was and spoke through the gap. "We are not stepping off. We are not unloading. We will pass through slow. If your rules say no, point us to the exit." His face did not change. His shoulders did. A small shift, then a glance over our hood at someone in cover. He waved to the side like he was telling someone to hold steady. The spike cart man looked for permission to pull. That was my cue. I put the jeep in gear and gave it a slow push. The push bar met the cart and slid it sideways against the barrier, tires squealing against paint. The man yanked the rope too late. The spikes scraped harmlessly on concrete, not rubber. On the left, the chain gate started to come across, quick and neat. The hinge post flexed just enough to show me where to hit. I held steady and aimed for the hinge base, not the chain. I gave the jeep more throttle. The bar hit low and bent the hinge clean off the anchor. The gate swung inward and folded on itself. I kept the line straight, not fast. Accelerating in a funnel is how you break your own tie rod and gift your life to a bunch of people in vests. A woman near the cart pulled a pistol and brought it up without drama. She had done this before. Mara fired one clean shot through the windshield gap and broke the pistol out of her hand. She screamed and dropped low. A man at the far side tried to shoulder a rifle behind a banner. Eliza placed a round into the banner pole above his shoulder, so the wind swung the fabric down and took his line of sight away. He staggered back. The medic in the mask reached for something under the table. I turned the wheel just enough to clip the table leg with the bar and knock the entire setup sideways. The lane opened free. We rolled out at a steady crawl and kept going. No chasing, no pride lap. We did not want to turn this into a rolling fight. We cleared the ground and got distance before anyone got organized enough to follow. We did not talk for 5 minutes. The jeep's engine note steadied and the mount on the roof sat quiet. I watched heat on the gauge and felt the steering settle. I looked in the mirror. Nobody came after us. The lane behind was a mess. It would slow them. That was enough. Mara checked her mag and said, "Muzzle high next time. I do not want to put glass in your lap." I nodded. "We did not take the bait," Eliza said. "We should warn whoever is listening." We would, but not over the same open band while we were still inside their hearing. We needed a place to pause and re-rack. The small National Guard satellite base sat west of the fairgrounds behind a fence with only one breach and a field of concrete revetments. We rolled in through the maintenance gate after cutting a rusted lock. The motor pool was stripped of anything obvious, but the bones were there. A low shed with a dead generator. A stack of Jersey barriers half sunk in dirt. A shed roof that would catch rain if it rained again this month. We parked nose out behind a revetment, set a bell line low across the inner lane, and dragged 2 barriers to close the breach halfway. We wedged stone into the gaps and dropped short rebar into drilled holes to lock the barriers in place. It was not a castle. It was enough to buy time against stupid people or a small herd. Water was our next job. A gutter ran along the roof edge. We rigged a downspout to a drum and ran 2 filter bags into a gravity filter. The flow was slow but clean. We did not even power the dead generator. Sound control beats lights when you have unknown neighbors. Eliza walked the armory rooms and pulled paper, manuals, old logs, codes that probably did not open anything now. She found a crate with 2 belts of 7.62mm set in plastic with desiccant. I opened a parts bin and found a set of feed powels and a return spring, both used but serviceable. We ate under the shed and watched dust move in strips along the road while the sun dropped. The radio caught 2 short-range pings in the evening, old 2-way units cycling on and off. Not Reese's cadence, not local chatter. Someone was hunting for comms or batteries by walking the dial and listening for squeals. We logged the times and direction with chalk on the wall. A small thermal drone hissed overhead after midnight, higher than the hobby unit we dropped in the valley. Different engine sound. It passed once, then again, then faded. We kept the Jeep under net and kept lights dark. No point advertising. We cut the base for anything else useful at dawn. A Humvee shelter held 2 busted radio mounts and a torn cable spool. Under a pile of canvas we found a traverse motor and reduction gearbox from a remote weapon station. The control box was gone, but the motor turned with a slow push on the leads. That was gold. Not for firepower, for control. Keeping the gun steady on a window at a crawl beats swinging by shoulder while turning a wheel and praying you do not slip. I pulled the motor and gearbox, a set of limit switches, and a box of bolts with grooves near the heads that matched the couple of set screws. I mounted the motor at the ring base with a fabricated bracket that tied into the rack plate and a brace down to the push bar frame. I ran a chain to a clutch sprocket that would let manual use if the motor failed or if I wanted to swing by hand. For control, I stripped a headlight relay block and wired it to a window switch. Left and right on the rocker cut in clean with fuses that would blow before anything cooked. I set a kill switch near my right knee. I ran a ground strap to keep noise off the radio. I tested pan left and right at idle. Slow traverse. No jerk. Good. I left elevation manual because the motor sized for that job was too heavy for the roof and I prefer the feel of elevation by hand anyway. We did 1 dry run in the motor pool lane, and then a live run on a stump out past the fence. I fed a short belt and fired 10 rounds in 2 controlled bursts while moving at a crawl. Cases fell clean, links kicked out. The barrel stayed tight. The traverse moved steady and stopped when I wanted. We logged the run, cleaned the feed tray, and sealed the belts again with fresh desiccant. We set a doctrine on paper and taped it near the roof hatch. No show use, no warning shots. Short bursts only when the road gives no choice. The gun stays cold in every other case. We could have stayed a day or 2, but the RF pings returned at noon at a different angle, and the drone sound came back later, higher and farther east. Staying longer meant siege. Siege kills mobility and takes your advantage and hands it to strangers. We broke down the water line, filled drums, left 2 small caches with dated notes in clean bags, and moved out. The base had weight. It had walls. It felt like a place to land. That feeling as a debt collector, I paid with distance. We rolled south at a pace that kept the engine happy. The road narrowed into low country with drain ditches and broken culverts. A water crossing waited where 2 culverts ran under a bank. The flood had ripped 1 culvert mouth into shards. The other was clogged with drift. The water ran low, full of leaves and plastic. A pair of waterlogged infected sat in the shade under the bank. They rose when the jeep noise slipped down. One slipped and fell face first into the water and came up slow. The other stared at our front and took 2 steps like it knew this path and was annoyed we were using it. We worked the crossing like a job on a clock. Eliza tossed a hook line over a rebar stub above the intact culvert. Mara kept the rifle low and aimed. I killed the engine, dropped, and pulled rope through a pulley on the winch line to angle the pull. We wanted to drag the jam out, not wedge it worse. I climbed the bank and cleared brush with a machete. The first infected came within 8 paces and moved fast for a man soaked in river water. Mara fired once into the ear line, and the head snapped and the body folded without drama. The second one turned toward the sound and surged, then tripped on the broken concrete and sprawled. I crossed to the culvert mouth and felt up into the blockage with a gloved hand. Fabric, plastic, branches, bones. I set the hook and stepped back. Eliza called tension. I signaled, then pulled with the winch at a slow pace to avoid a sudden surge. The knot of trash released in a slurp and the water speed picked up and dropped again as the level equalized. We cleared the mouth as far as arms could reach, then let the flow do the rest. We used a tarp screen to keep splash out of the Jeep's bay, and then rolled across at a crawl with steady throttle. No choke, no stall. We did not linger. 2 miles past the crossing, we hit a market street that somebody had turned into a funnel. Cars angled just so. A banner overhead said trade and medicine. Stalls with blankets and boxes. The first man waved us to stop between 2 displays. His clothes were layered and clean. He wore a bandage on his arm like a prop. The second man in a window had a rifle with a scope. His barrel tracked our windshield as if we would not see it from this angle. The ground under a rug had a shape that never belongs on a street. Spike mat folded under foam. Gate hinges in the side alleys again. Same playbook as the fairgrounds, just smaller and meaner. We did not stop. I kept the crawl and used the push bar to slide a stall gently aside without smashing it, so the movement looked like a car bumper, not a battering ram. The window man raised the rifle a fraction. The ring motor panned left on a short tap. I pointed the slot at his window and held it there without firing. The barrel and the shield face have a language. He understood it and lowered his own by an inch. On the right, a teenager tried to pull a strap from our jerrycan rack. Mara rapped the glass with her knuckles and shook her head. He hesitated and stepped back. We eased through the center, never stopping, never rising above idle. When the alley gate swung, I hit the hinge again. Same low spot, same result. We rolled out of the funnel into open road. Eliza switched the radio to an open band and left a short, clean message. Market Street trap, 2 blocks north of the feed plant. Spike mat under blue rug. Hinged chain gates in side alleys. Window rifle in 2nd floor, east side. Do not enter the lane. No names, no drama, just facts. If it saves 1 person, the breath is not wasted. By late day, the land rose into long slopes. Heat shimmered off the road and drifted across the hood. The alternator temp held in a range I could live with. Transmission warmed on the grades, then cooled on the flats. I pulled the hood at a turnout and propped it to let heat bleed. We ran the manual fan override for a minute and let the Jeep idle. Brake smell hung in the air at the bottom of a long descent, not ours. I used engine braking going down and checked the rotors when we stopped. Fine. The steering play showed up at 35 on rough patches, then faded when I dropped to 20. I made a note to inspect bushings next quiet morning. We camped in a road cut and set line alarms. Bell low, paperclip high. We ate in turns and rechecked the new Traverse motor for heat creep. The gearbox felt warm to a touch and then lost heat like it should. Good. The belt stayed sealed, and we left the feed tray dry. I do not oil a gun and leave it open to dust. We kept the radio low. 2 voices bled through around midnight. One of the expo voices asked for more water and complained about the gate damage like it was a surprise. Another voice suggested moving to a different entrance and switching the time of day for the lure. I logged the phrasing. We had their style now. At dawn, we heard a clean signal in Spanish about a water plant running on gravity with no fuel needed. It was faint and far. It did not smell like a script. No big promise. Just a basic truth. I did not change course on a voice from a hill I could not see. I circled it on the paper map and kept rolling. If the plant exists and the pipes still move, great. If not, we lost nothing except ink. We took the south cut to avoid a broken bridge packed with cars. The low water crossing beyond the bend had a firm base if you stayed on the high ridges. We sent a walking line first to test the bottom. I edged the jeep in at a steady idle with intake high, and a tarp ready to pull if splash got stupid. The water rose to the hub and pushed at the tires, and then dropped as we crept up the far bank. The roof mount stayed dry. The belt stayed quiet. On the far side, I killed the engine and checked the bay for spray. Nothing got where it should not be. We set a small cache under a stump and left a mark. Only we and one other kind of person would read. We stopped for the day behind a windbreak of low trees. The jeep sat nose out again with net over the roof to break the shape. The ring mount canted a degree to the right from the last slope. I loosened and reset the brace and tightened the bolts with a cross pattern until the plates sat level. Eliza updated the ledger with fuel, rounds, and the belt count after the test. Mara set a simple metal strip alarm across the path that clicks when a foot breaks a weak magnet. We watched until the birds returned to the hedgerow. Then the birds went quiet for a minute, then came back. Nothing human within a field. We slept in rotations. I woke before my watch ended and wrote what still needed doing. Replace the stabilizer bushing in 2 days. Repack the traverse chain with a smear of fresh grease after 50 miles. Test the foot switch with gloves on during a slow roll on dirt with nobody watching. Run the ring across a series of angles with the clutch open and closed, so muscle memory stays true under stress. Check the dam back in the valley when we pass through again someday. If we pass through again at all. We might not. We reached a long flat that used to be a truck stop. The bays were empty. The roof sagged. A single sign hung sideways. We did not stop. The truck stop was a dead stage for ambush that has not changed anywhere in the last 2 years. Open asphalt invites attention. We cut around it on a service road and came out near a fenced field with abandoned buses. We needed nothing from those either. Buses hold dark corners and children's drawings that make a person forget where he is. Keep driving. As we took a curve, the radio snapped to life with a voice we knew. Reese. Calm. Short. 2 heat signatures on East Ridge at dawn. Probably hunters. If that is you, use the south cut. Water is low. Keep it steady. No hello. No goodbye. Just a clean handoff. I answered with nothing. We took the south cut because it matched our map and our goals, not because Reese blessed it. It still felt like a small nod from a person who chose order when she could have chosen noise. That closes her place in our story for now. The road turned hard-packed to dirt and then to gravel. Heat came up off the ground in waves and put a shimmer where the ruts met. The jeep carried it fine. I let the speed drift down and kept tires on solid ground. We rolled without chatter. The world narrowed to what the windshield showed and what the mirrors confirmed. The air in the cab held the smell of hot rubber and old cloth. The mount above me made no sound. The kill switch sat under my knee like a small promise that if anything in the roofline tried to act up, I could throw it dark in a blink. We set the next sleep under a short stand of live oaks west of a shallow draw. Mara took first watch, Eliza second, me third. We agreed we would not build any more permanent stations for a while. We would keep moving through the fat parts of the map, where roads cross out of sight of anyone who likes charging tolls or setting phony clinics. If we found someone running a clean trade in daylight with no traps, we would use it. If not, we would make our own path like we always do. The night held steady for the first 2 hours. The paperclip clacker moved once with a soft tap when a bat clipped the line. Nothing else. Mara came down from the ladder and handed me the rifle with a small nod. She stretched and slid into her bag. Eliza rolled onto her side and pulled her jacket over her shoulders. I settled onto the platform edge with the pistol across my thigh, and the ring mount outlined against a pale slice of sky. The wind dropped. The leaves stopped showing their undersides. I listened for the small patterns that call out trouble. Near dawn, 2 short clicks sounded from the south, like stones tapped. Not animal, too even. I kept still. A minute later, 1 click answered from the east. I raised the binoculars and scanned the ridge through the gaps. Two shapes lay prone in scrub on an angle that watched both our approach lanes. Rifles. No movement. Patient work. Stalkers. I did not shout. I slid the pistol back into the holster, set the rifle on the sill, and tapped Eliza's ankle. She woke clean and silent. I pointed south, then east. She nodded and reached for her notebook. We watched another minute. The south shape scooted an inch to clear a branch. The east one kept sight on the lower path. They had the patience to wait for a footfall. The ring motor whirred when I thumbed the rocker. I kept the traverse slow and stopped the slot on the southern bush line. I did not fire. The barrel framed the stalker and told him the same thing. It told the window man in town, "I see you. Your move now." The southern rifle lowered an inch. The east rifle kept position, then dipped. I did not drop aim. I kept the barrel pointed, steady. After a long minute, the southern shape slid back along the ground, careful, never standing. The east one copied the move. Both melted behind brush and did not reappear. We waited 5 more minutes. Eliza tracked where scrub bent and where it stayed set. No return. I eased the barrel to neutral and locked the traverse kill switch. We did not pursue. Our job is not to chase ghosts. Our job is to get where we are going without letting the wrong people own our time. We broke camp at first light. Ladder up, lines coiled, hoist stowed. The jeep started on the first turn. We rolled onto the farm lane and kept it at a quiet crawl for the first mile. The sunrise brought heat early, and the road stink rose off the cracked asphalt. A pair of ordinary infected wandered at a fence line and did not show interest. We left them to rot in the sun and moved on. The long slope burn began mid-morning, a 2-mile climb with gravel washouts and exposed rock. I dropped into low and let the jeep do the work. The manual fan override stayed on. The hood latch was tight, so I did not prop it. Eliza read the grade changes and called the soft spots where rain had carved ruts. Mara watched the shoulders for broken rock that would cut a sidewall. The engine temp held just above normal, then crept. We stopped halfway in a pull-out and let heat bleed while I checked under the hood. No leaks. Belt tension correct. Alternator bracket bolts still tight. The traverse motor bracket showed no stress lines. We waited 2 minutes and moved again, slower. At the top, the view opened. Flat fields stretched into haze. A bridge sat in the distance with cars stacked wall to wall and 2 burned trucks at the midpoint. That was the main border crossing we were not going to take. The approach road leading to it ran between berms and old lighting poles, like a narrow corridor built to trap hope. We read it once and turned away from it before it read us. We chose the low route through a string of irrigation canals and service roads that would lead to a river bend and a low water crossing. The map we keep on paper and in heads matched what we saw. 2 farms, 1 storage yard, then a levee cut and a narrow drive down to the river flat. We followed the plan. At the storage yard, the chain link gate hung by 1 hinge. Inside, rows of locked units. Too much risk for too little reward. We did not browse. We stopped long enough for me to scavenge 2 angle irons from a pile and 4 bolts from a fallen bracket. Those would make a brace for the ring shield if the next washboard shook it loose. 10 minutes and we were moving again. The levee cut dropped steeply to a flat lined with smooth stones. The river ran low and brown, with patches of algae stuck to branches. The far bank rose gentle, no obvious choke points. We parked on the high ground and walked down with the rope and probe pole. Bottom felt firm underfoot along the pale water path. We marked the tire line with stones. We walked the intake path. Clear. I stretched the tarp across the front as a splash barrier and secured the top edge under the hood lip. The winch line stayed free with the hook fast to a pine on the far side as an anchor, just in case. We do not tempt weightlessness in soft water. We build a safety before we need it. I rolled the jeep into the water at idle. The current pushed at the tires and then settled as we moved into the deeper slot. Stones clacked under the tread and rolled. The nose rose toward the far bank. Eliza watched the intake and signaled with her hand when a wave licked high. The tarp cut the slap. We crept up the exit and onto dry. I stopped and checked for spray under the hood. Dry. The belt had picked up grit. I wiped it with a rag and left the hood open a minute to let hot air out. We ate in the shade and listened. Birds worked the far bank, no human noise. The only metal sound was cooling under the hood. I rechecked the ring bolts and tightened the new angle braces to the shield. I ran the traverse half a turn left and half a turn right to keep the motor honest. No drag, no hitch. We rolled the tarp and stowed it. Then we followed the farm road south. That road threaded between orchards gone to thicket and fields gone to seed. We passed a billboard with Agua scrawled under a torn water company ad. Someone had tried to direct survivors to taps that were probably dry a year ago. A cluster of infected stood in an old bus stop, swaying. We eased by. The road carried us to a crossroads, where 4 low buildings made a crossroads town. No cars, no movement. The place had that hollow look small towns get after 2 summers of heat and looting. I considered stopping to check for parts, then decided not to. The Jeep is the mission. A closed hood in a quiet place is an invitation to trouble. On the far edge of town, a rusted gate blocked a side street with a hand-painted sign that read, "Clinic and Charity." Fresh paint over old bullet holes. The hinges had new weld beads. We did not turn down that street. We do not feed copycat setups. We found a cut across a field where irrigation pipe sections lay in rows, and we used those as landmarks to drift back to the main farm lane. The lane ran white and dusty until it hit a windrow of trees. Beyond that, low country again, and the second river that paralleled the border for a long stretch. We reached the second crossing near sundown and did not try it in the dark. New moon tonight. No overhead light. The far bank looked like it could hold a vehicle if we picked the right exit, but shadows turned depth into lies. We camped above the bank in a stand of scrub and set lines. The Jeep sat under net. I did one more check on the belts, the alternator bracket, and the traverse wiring. Everything checked out. We ate jerked meat and a handful of dried fruit. Water ran low but within range. Eliza plotted the next 3 miles on a paper square and clipped it to the dash with a binder clip. The night carried river noise and small splashes that could have been fish or could have been the slow shift of branches in the flow. Once, an infected moaned downstream, and then nothing. I took second watch and listened to the small knocks inside the Jeep as the metal cooled and contracted. The paperclip hit once and stopped. The bell did not move. No need to wake anyone for that. We were up before dawn. We walked the crossing again with poles and lines. I set a second anchor on our side so we could pull ourselves back if the front sank and we lost traction. I ran the winch cable across to a dead root on the far side and wrapped truckers' hitches into the pull line to tighten it without winching the root out of the bank. We moved the stones that marked yesterday's line 2 feet right, where the bottom felt firmer. I drove in with the same method. Idle, steady, no hero moves. The current was less pushy here. The far bank had a soft lip that tried to grab the front tire. The winch line kept the nose true. I gave a small throttle bump and we popped free. The tarp took splash and kept it away from the fan. We rolled onto the far side and cut the winch line. The anchor held. We recovered it and coiled it. On the far bank, the ground gave way to a path that climbed into mesquite and low scrub. The air heated fast. We drove with windows cracked an inch and no music, no radio. The Jeep ran in a clean rhythm. The belt we wiped the day before stopped squeaking. The Traverse motor stayed cool at idle. We were in good shape, given the miles and the heat. Halfway up the grade, a figure walked out onto the track from behind a rock. Male, lean, hands up, no weapon visible. He spoke in Spanish and asked for water. His eyes kept cutting to the side of the track where brush hid a glint. I kept the Jeep rolling slowly and did not answer. Mara watched the brush. Eliza had her hand on the dash radio. I tapped the horn twice. The man flinched and stepped back, then raised both hands higher. The brush to the right moved. A gun barrel showed and then withdrew. I swept the ring a fraction and stopped it at the brush. No shot. The man yelled something about hungry children. I did not see any children. I did not stop. We rolled past. No shot came. The brushman did not want to fight with a moving armored rig in daylight. Right choice. We put a mile between us and that corner before we let our shoulders come down a notch. Eliza exhaled and said, "Every third person tries the same act now." She was not wrong. Desperation wears the same clothes in every county. Midday brought another long slope, this time a descent that wanted brake heat. I put the transmission in a lower gear and let the engine do the work. The brakes only kissed for speed control on the final stretch. At the bottom, a strip of shade lay under a line of poles. We took it and ate. Mara tightened the traverse chain a quarter turn. I ran a cloth through the rifle bore and put a dab of oil on the bolt face, then wiped it dry. Eliza checked belt seals and rotated the desiccant packs. We had to choose between the burned bridge with blockers and the low water branch we had planned. The bridge was still wrong. A burned tractor trailer jackknifed at the center with two smaller cars behind it. Someone had hung a banner that said, "New Order," which is old code for trouble. The approach road had 3 choke points with Jersey barriers. You could clear them one at a time, but each one puts you in view of higher ground on both sides. We did not humor it. We stuck to the plan, low water branch again, even if it added miles. The low road crossed 3 culverts and a dry creek bed. The first culvert was clear. The second had debris we cleared with a hook and the winch. The third was packed with wet mats and smashed branches. The smell of rot rolled out of the mouth and a wet shape shifted in the shade. A large infected hunched in the culvert throat. Water swelled and released around it. It had grown heavy off the current and rot, and it blocked the flow like a rag stuffed in a pipe. We stopped 50 feet out. The jeep idled. I studied angles. We needed to clear it without smashing our front into broken concrete or soaking the bay. Headshots can bounce on swollen skulls. The ear line works best. The occipital bone is good if you can get it. Mara took the rifle and set up behind the push bar with elbows braced. The thing turned its head toward the sound and tried to pull forward. It stuck. I stepped to the side and held a board as a mask to cut splash on the first shots. Mara fired into the right ear canal. The body jerked and made a wet gurgle. It did not fall back. She put a second shot into the left temple. The head sagged. The body slid an inch. I kept my eyes on its hands and elbows. It twitched once and then stopped. We used the hook on the winch to catch fabric and belt and dragged the body out a foot at a time until water grabbed it and pulled it down the channel. We pushed it against the far wall with a pole and let the flow pin it there. We cleared the mouth and rolled through at a crawl. The tarp caught what spray there was. The fan stayed dry. We passed and gave the bank time to settle. No show of power, just the work. 2 miles later, the road opened into a wide flat with concrete stubs and the remains of a checkpoint booth. This had been a minor border crossing. The booth windows were smashed. The light poles were down. A faded sign promised a 20-minute wait that no longer meant anything. A pile of scrap sat to one side, where someone had gathered metal for a project that never got built. I grabbed 2 lengths of flat stock and a set of U-clamps for the rack, in case the next washboard rattled something loose. We skirted the booth and followed a dirt track that paralleled the fence line. The fence had gaps. Too many to matter. Someone had cut and mended and cut again, until it was a line that only stopped the slow and the sick. We found a gap that would let the jeep pass if we cleared 2 posts. The posts were rotted at the base. I worked a crowbar into the soil and pried until the posts rocked. Mara put the winch line on one and pulled while I lifted. It came out with a wet sound and a crack. We leaned it aside. The second gave easier. We drove through and stopped to reset them so the gap did not flag itself to anyone walking up behind us. On the far side, the country felt the same. Fields, lines of scrub, a few stuck cars that had been looted clean. The air did not change because a line on a map changed. We did not feel different either. The jeep ran. We had work. We kept moving. We set a microcache under a slab on the far bank. Water, a small medkit, a note with a date, and 2 symbols only we use. We tucked it hard to find and recorded it in Eliza's ledger. We do not leave big caches to make other people think we run a charity. We leave small ones where we might need them when the road circles back in 6 months. Afternoon light got hard. The breeze died. The jeep's hood baked. The gauge stayed good, then crept 1 tick. I turned the heat on low to dump a bit from the engine. It helps more than you think in a pinch. We rolled with windows open and sweat soaking the seats. No complaints. We have seats. We have a running machine. That is the list. At a bend near a set of low warehouses, a pickup eased into the road ahead from behind a pallet stack and tried to match speed with us. A passenger leaned out and waved like a friend. His other hand stayed out of view. He shouted a cell about water and safe camp. His eyes kept going to the roof. I gave no sign. I kept a steady 15 miles an hour. He edged closer. The passenger's offhand lifted. A sawed-off barrel flashed. He aimed low for a tire. I turned the Jeep into him in a gentle but firm drift and tapped his rear quarter with the push bar. His truck bucked and skidded out of the lane and into the ditch. Dirt flew. I did not stop. I did not fire the roof gun. I took the line that gave us a gap and left. In the mirror I saw the pickup struggle and then stall. We were already a field away. We made camp in a stand of gum trees with peeling bark and a dry floor. We set the usual alarms. We ate small and drank enough, but not more. Eliza worked the ledger and rewrote the last 2 days into clean lines with dates spelled out. Mara ran a cloth over the rifle and checked the holdover at 30 yards against a trunk scar. I pulled the ring pins and checked for elongated holes. Fine. I wiped the chain and hit it with a thin smear of grease. I gave the Traverse motor a rest test. It turned cold. Good. The radio clicked. A Spanish voice repeated the water plant message with a few more words. Gravity, long run from the hills, small town tap flow. It listed no names. It did not offer shelter. It gave a time when valves would be open to flush lines. That is detail you do not get in scams. Could be a farmer with a working tank. Could be a small crew who found a way to move water without fuel. We drew a line on the map toward it, then circled a 50-mile buffer around it and wrote 2 words. Test slowly. Night moved in with a slow fade. The grove snapped and creaked as it cooled. An infected moved along the edge and breathed in that empty way they do when the lungs still work but nothing else does. It did not come closer. It drifted. The alarms did not speak. I slept in a set of short runs and woke ready. Morning brought a pale sky and a smell of dust. We rolled early to beat heat. The Jeep felt right. The right pull had not returned. The alternator hummed at a note that meant nothing needed me right now. The ring sat quiet. The belt stayed sealed. We moved with purpose but not speed. The road widened a hair and gave us options to leave if another trap tried to form. We hit a narrow feedlot road lined with broken posts and wire. A clean white tarp flapped on a fence with a red cross painted on it. Eliza pointed at the paint and shook her head. The lines were too clean and fresh. The wood under the tarp was sun-bleached, not shade-kept. It had been staged in the last week. We went around, cutting across a strip of dirt and back to the lane. No surprise men stepped out. That does not mean none were there. It means they were too slow or not motivated to die in the sun for our supplies. By midday, we reached a cluster of low buildings around a water tower. The tower stamped a shadow across a plaza with a concrete basin and old benches. The tap at the base was dry, but the tower still held water if the valves could be opened. The small radio message could have come from a place like this. We walked a slow circle and checked doors. Most were open, some blocked. No recent prints. We did not try to open the main valve without a plan. Water runs where gravity tells it. If we cracked it now, we might flood a basement where someone sleeps or attract a dozen infected with the promise of sound. We marked the tower on the ledger and left. The last hours of the day slid by in dust and sun. The Jeep's seat warmed under me until it felt like a stove. I shifted to keep my back from sticking. The kill switch sat under my knee like a button I hoped to forget. We passed 3 dead cars, 2 of which had been stripped so clean it looked like a shop class had spent a semester on them. The third held a blanket and a child's shoe. We did not open it. I drove on. As sun dropped, the land lifted into low hills. We took a cut into a sheltered gully and parked behind brush. Net up, ladder down, lines set. We ate, drank, checked, logged. I held the map in my hands and traced our line with a finger from the valley to here. The border was behind us by 2 days of careful work. Ahead was a line of small towns and agricultural plants we could use or dodge. The water plant rumor sat a day and a half to the west. We decided to angle that way as long as road and risk agreed. We lay down. The world narrowed to the noises of our gear and the faint murmur of wind. I told myself the same rules I always tell myself before sleep. Move early, keep sound low, watch for mirrors and hinges, keep roads open when you can, cut traps, leave small marks for those who read, shoot only when the road leaves no other move, keep the machine ready because the machine is your house and your proof. We reached the basin at mid-afternoon, after a long run of quiet roads and low hills. A cluster of concrete tanks sat against a slope, half hidden by brush. A short channel fed them from higher ground. Gravity did the rest. The taps ran a thin line of clear water into an old trough. No engine noise, no fuel smell, just a working fall. The buildings around the tanks were simple. 2 block sheds with metal doors, a tin-roofed workshop, and a small cinder-block house with a porch and a deep overhang. No fresh tracks, no banners, no signs promising anything. It looked like a place someone left and nobody mean had found yet. We cleared the sheds first. One held hand tools, a pipe vise bolted to a bench, boxes of fittings, and a greasy notebook with valve positions written in block letters. The other held a set of plastic barrels with lids and a crate of ceramic filters still in paper. The house had a dry floor, a table, and 2 rooms with doors that shut and latched. A cracked picture on the wall faced the window. No traps, no stink. I opened each closet with the muzzle low and light high, then let the air sit. Nothing moved. We watched the place until sunset before making any decision. One infected walked along the ridge and veered away when it could not find a path down. Another drifted along the far fence and peeled off toward a ditch. No groups, no fast ones, no signs of a patrol. The water kept a steady run. We listened to the radio on low. No chatter about the site. No quiet zone calls from this direction. Just a few clipped voices far off arguing about a stalled truck. We spoke 3 words to each other. Sleep here tonight. We parked the jeep nose out under the overhang of the workshop and threw net over the roof to break the outline. I ran a line through the frame and into a ground anchor set in concrete so nobody could roll it by hand. We set a bell on monofilament across the path to the tanks and hung a paperclip clacker at shoulder height on the path to the house. We ate on the porch with boots off and rifles within reach. It felt wrong to sit for long after months of motion, but the ground under us did not argue. We slept in the rooms with the doors barred and the windows cracked. The alarms made one small sound when a night animal tested the path. Nothing else. Morning came clear. We did not leave. We worked. I followed the valve map in the notebook and opened the upper gate a half turn to flush silt, then closed it back to the mark the original caretaker had written. Eliza checked the filters and swapped a clogged cartridge for a clean one. Mara set a small line of wire with cans near the upper fence to mark direction if someone tried to climb. None of it was loud. None of it looked like a billboard. It was enough to tell us who was coming and from where. We tested the water on a small stove, boiled a pot, cooled it, and drank it. No taste of iron, no oil film. We filled 2 jugs and left the tap at a slow run to keep the line from growing algae. We laid out tools on the bench and started a maintenance rotation we could keep if we stayed longer than a day. We did not say the word stay. We acted like people who planned to move at dawn and then did not. By the end of the first week, the place had our marks. We replaced a hinge on the workshop door with a salvaged steel one that did not squeal. We put rubber under the Jeep's push bar where it touched the wall so it would not thump if wind shifted it at night. We ran a small line from the roof panels to a battery bank in the shed and used it to power a dim light on a switch under the table. We cooked outside to keep the house clean. We dug a narrow trench behind the tanks for grey water and covered it with boards. We set a short plank garden in plastic tubs and planted beans from a jar Eliza had carried for 2 years without finding a place to use them. We did not ignore the roads. Every 2 days, one of us took the Jeep on a sweep in a slow circle. Never the same time twice. Never the same route twice in a row. We cleared one small blockage where a dead tree had fallen across a service road. We left 2 water bottles under a rock at a crossroads with a note in plain language. Water plant ahead, no tolls, no guns drawn, do not break valves. The next week, the bottles were gone and the note was in place. That told me someone passed through with sense. We met the careful stranger on day 12 without speaking. He, or she, the build was hard to call, left a double notch at the base of the mesquite by the lower path and a small dot inside a circle on the back of the workshop bench. No attempt at our doors. No footprint near the windows. We left a return mark on the lower fence post, a short hash above a longer one, the way we had seen before. The next morning that mark had a second short hash beside it. Conversation done without voices. That was enough. An infected wandered up the access lane on day 14 and stopped at the bell line. It turned at the sound and drifted back into brush. We ran one suppressed round into it when it reached a fence corner and would not clear, not to keep the place clean in some foolish way, just to prevent a body from drawing more later. We dragged it by the belt to the far ditch and covered the head with metal. We went back to work. Radio brought one message from the valley on day 16. Reese again. Short as always. East roads are open. Avoid the fairgrounds. Floodgate stays shut unless rain. Keep moving or build quiet. It was not addressed to anyone. It sounded like she was logging notes for whoever still listened. I turned the volume down and left it on for an hour. No follow-up. That closed that chapter for me. She would hold her piece of ground her way. We would hold ours, or we would move. We tuned the Jeep to a maintenance schedule that made sense for a machine that was now a neighbor, not a stranger rolling through. Oil change from our saved stock. Belt inspection and a light scrub to lift dust. Grease on the ring traverse chain, then a wipe until it looked dry. We pulled the M240, cleaned it, stored it in a locked rack in the workshop, and left the ring empty with the shield folded down. The rule held. The gun is last resort. In a place this quiet, last resort should stay locked most days. We built a canvas cover for the ring to keep sun off the bearings and keep birds from nesting in the slot. By day 21, the bean tubs sprouted. The roofs held when a small shower came through and left water pooled in the tank trough. We set out bowls and jugs to catch what fell from the overhang. The smell of the place shifted from dust and oil to wet concrete and plant. That was new. We did not make a point of it. We just took the fact and wrote it down by living it. A small group of travelers walked in on day 24. 2 adults and a teenager. Packs light, hands clean, no guns out. They stopped at the lower fence line and called out. We stepped onto the porch with pistols holstered and hands visible. They asked for water and a quiet patch of ground to sit for an hour. We said yes, with rules. No stepping past the house. No touching the tank valves. No mention of the place on the open band. They understood. We filled their bottles and gave them a strip of jerky each. They left a bag of nails and a half roll of tape as trade without us asking. The teenager looked at the Jeep like it was a story. I told him 3 facts about it. He nodded like he was memorizing something that would matter later. Then he left. No drama. The month rolled and kept its shape. We fixed small things. A hinge, a leaky joint in the upper line, a squeak in the shed door. I swapped the steering stabilizer bushing with the spare I had planned weeks earlier. Mara built a simple rack for drying cloth under the overhang where wind passes, but rain does not. Eliza drew a clean map of the basin, the lines, the valves, and the watch spots, then copied it twice and stored the copies in sealed bags in different places. We could drive away tomorrow and leave the next person a working diagram without our names on it. 2 nights in a row we slept without waking to alarms. That did not make us lazy. It let us measure what quiet feels like when it is earned and not borrowed. On the second night, I lay on the porch with my back against the post and listened to water run through the pipe. The Jeep sat in shadow with the cover on its ring and the hood closed. The house smelled clean. The wind slid across the upper fence and did not carry any human voice. That was as close to peace as I remember in 3 years. On day 33, we had a talk without pushing it. We stood by the tank and reviewed the facts. The place works without fuel. The roads in and out can be watched from 2 spots with enough overlap that surprises are rare. The Jeep is healthy. The belts are clean. The batteries hold charge. The gun is oiled and stored. We have food for a month if the beans fail, and the lanes go empty. Infected pass by once in a while and then move on because the slope and the fences do not favor them. No road crew has tried to toll anything within 3 miles. That could change, but it has not yet. We decided to stay. Not forever. For as long as the place stays quiet and useful. We kept 2 travel kits packed by the door. We kept the Jeep ready, tank never below half, tires cracked and inspected every week. We kept lines and alarms light and simple so they never got in our way if we had to leave on short notice. We kept the plan in our heads that we could be rolling in 10 minutes if something broke. But we stayed. It felt right. The days settled into a routine we made from work that mattered. Morning checks on valves, midday sweep with the Jeep to make sure no new mirrors appeared on posts and no fresh chain gates had been dragged into lanes. Afternoon repair jobs, evening water fill and meal. Radio on low once at night to catch anything nearby. Sleep with windows cracked and doors latched. The month held like that. No big speeches, no final stands. Just a place that fits the rules we live by. One afternoon, a mark appeared on the lower fence post where the careful stranger had left the double notch before. A new sign, 2 short parallels, and 1 long slash under them. Eliza and I read it the same way. Passers-by, not a threat, moving west. We did nothing. We let the sign sit. That is the kind of conversation that keeps people like us from bumping into each other on purpose. Toward the end of the month, the radio carried a message in Spanish again from farther west. The same voice, calm, listing valve times, and a request that travelers close gates after filling. He mentioned a small pest problem, rodents getting into grain, and asked for tin and wire in trade if anyone had extra. That is the kind of talk I trust. It asks for what a person can give without cost in blood. We put 2 squares of tin and a coil of wire in a bag and hung it on the fence with a note. 2 days later, the bag was gone. In its place, a jar of dried chilies and a folded piece of paper with a hand-drawn map to a field where a pump still worked if you turned the handle slow. Fair. When wind shifts carry voices from the county road, we step onto the porch and listen. Most days there is nothing. On the days when there is something, it is brief. A laugh, a short call, a tire hitting a pothole, then silence again. We do not go looking for company. We do not hide from it either. We keep our rules on the porch wall in small lettering. No tolls, no bait, no guns out at the fence. Do not touch the valves without asking. Leave a mark, not a mess. That is the whole code. The Jeep sits under the overhang most days now, clean and ready. I turn the key every other morning and let the engine run for 2 minutes while I listen. I cycle the lights. I test the kill switch. I traverse the ring a quarter turn and back with the clutch open, then lock it and cover it again. I check the tires and tap the lugs. I wipe dust and oil the hood latch. I keep a small bag behind the seat with passports to the world we live in now. Hose clamps, tape, 2 belts, a handful of bolts, a plug kit, a siphon, 3 fuses, a strip of rubber to wrap a leak, and a note with our own marks and the signs we have learned from others. If the road calls, we can answer. Sometimes I walk up the slope above the tanks and sit where I can see both approaches and the line of trees that hides the far lane. I count the seconds between bird calls. I watch dust lift where the service road cuts the fields. I hold the small radio and listen to static for a while, and then turn it off. I do not think long thoughts about what comes next. The list stays the same. Keep the water running. Keep the roads near us clear of traps. Help the person who arrives with empty hands and a steady voice. Stand up to the person who arrives with a lie and a blade, and keep the Jeep ready whether we move tomorrow or in a year. We found a place that works because it demands basic habits and does not punish them. It is not a miracle. It is a basin with gravity and tanks and wind that carries noise away. It holds a month of quiet without snapping. It lets 3 people sleep more nights than not. It lets us eat beans we planted with our own hands. It lets us listen. That is enough. If someone hearing this drives the same roads and passes this way, read the marks. Follow the rules. Do your work. Do not start fires you cannot end. If you come to the fence and speak, keep your hands open. If you are hunted, we will not look away. If you hunt, do not come here. If you need water, take what you can carry. and close the valve behind you. If you have news worth the breath, share it, then move on, or stay a night and help fix something that will outlast both of us. We are still who we were. We move when the place stops making sense. We stay when it does. Right now it does. A month of quiet proved it. The Jeep rests under cover, the ring asleep, the alarm set, the lines tight, the beans climbing their strings. The road is not gone. It waits. We will know when to take it. Until then, we live here, not in the past and not in a promise, just in a small basin where water runs downhill and where good rules keep danger out and let people breathe. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to keep the stories alive. For now, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and stay alive. Jack's Nightmares, signing off. Until next time, survivor.